Cabinet taking place in Oxford Town Hall on Wednesday, the 7th of February at 6 o'clock. Welcome to everybody. I believe we are all here. So first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I've not received any. Item 2 is addresses and questions by members of the public and no requests have been received. Item 3 is council addresses on any items for decision on the Cabinet agenda and no items requests have been received. Item 4 is council addresses on neighbourhood issues, no requests have been received. Item 5 is items raised by Cabinet members, no requests have been received. So that takes us on to scrutiny reports and Sir James Fry.
Thank you very much. I'm very impressed by the speed with which you go through your agenda.
Well, to be fair, that wasn't really the important bits of the agenda, was it?
Scrutiny yesterday was over in just under an hour. I mean, remarkable. Well, thanks very much. I think you all know the budget review group, in fact, is terribly hardworking because it's also the finance panel, same membership. And we met as a budget panel 4 times in January. We must thank the officers very much, especially I single out Alice Courtney, who did an incredible job with taking, it's not minutes, but notes and drafting various reports that we then discussed. There were 9 recommendations. I'm just looking at them. If you read the recommendations, my view is a lot of them about process rather than really relevant to the budget. The ones which I would single out, one which is interesting is about how we achieve, I know it's not immediate, but from year 2, the savings proposed in the council tax reduction scheme, because the concern was that people who currently get 100% reduction, when they are introduced into a scheme, then you've got to sort of add them to the list of people to be contacted, and you know, how do you chase them up? And so there was, I think there was a general consensus we could have maybe a modified scheme which have retained the 100%, but shared the burden with the other groups. The number 2 I've highlighted here was considering the council involvement in and the funding of fibre to homes. We had a member of our committee who knows something about these things and was saying that with the normal speeds that people can get, this is a bit of an unnecessary extra, and queried whether it was a good use of money. The third one, which was one I felt, is still about seeing if we can eventually, I know it's hard to deal with them, but negotiate with the owner of Golden Cross, because our covered market is prospering. The evening appears to be a very successful opening, but if you can't get in off Cornmarket, people don't know it's happening. A lot of people don't. And I think it would be nice, and speaking to businesses in Golden Cross, they would also appreciate it. Pizza Express is open anyhow until quite late. The third one, which I'm not sure I fully agreed with, was to introduce a tariff for 0 to 1 hours at the park and rides. The only case where I can see there would be any money would be for people working along the Botley Road near Seacourt, because otherwise, you know, the other park and rides, you'd have to go somewhere and be back within an hour. But this anyhow was a recommendation. There was a request for analysis of the income that could be generated. The other recommendations were largely about ensuring democratic participation by other council groups and things like strategic reviews of services in the community services area. People were interested in getting slightly better data than we currently have on domestic abuse and homelessness, which was one of the issues and the costs related to that. We were asked to request compilation of information to share with the future government about issues faced by local government as a result of coordination between central government departments, which clearly is an issue, and then lobbying the Home Office about engaging local authorities in relation to the asylum dispersal hotels, but none of these last ones are really budget issues. As I say, they're more about process. But I do want to thank the members who participated, gave a lot of time, and for the officers who gave very copious reports and answered lots of questions. So thank everyone very much.
Well, thank you very much, James, for a really thorough job as always. Ed.
Yeah, but my thanks as well. I mean, I do, as I've said many times, appreciate the work that Scrutiny puts in. I think having this fine-grained approach is really helpful, and it's appreciated. And this sort of element of challenge. And also I think two things actually are helpful coming out of this. One is not sort of trying to sort of for Scrutiny to sort of by majority vote to pick winners in terms of budget amendments. You know, I mean, ultimately that's the council. It's a reason I won't give a long political speech this afternoon. To everyone's disappointment. I might give a long apolitical speech. I might just warble on from it, but not that either. So in all seriousness, that I think isn't the point. I think for example, the broadband comment here is fine. We haven't accepted the recommendation. I think the specifics in the answer might be quite helpful. But again, why not? Why not offer a bit of challenge to some things which probably are going to fly below the radar of the political process? So I think that's okay. I also think that the process points, again, are okay, because I've always thought as a council, with our budget process, it's not an exercise in technical financial planning. It's also an exercise in, I suppose, wider planning of what we do as a council, you know, what we used to call corporate planning. And so within that, necessarily, the line between what is narrowly a budget issue and what's a wider corporate issue will be a fuzzy one. And so if there's something which people pick up on, which is important to them that they say, then they should carry on. I mean, you mentioned, James, a few particular points. I think I have now said in about 7 different council meetings how happy we are to agree to this first recommendation. But lest anyone in Scrutiny is in any doubt, we agree it. And indeed, it was, you know, our intention all along. We weren't going to sort of blindly go down one particular route with the council tax reduction scheme, saving a particular amount of money. Instead, you know, we will absolutely see what different options there are to raise that. I think the responses on the rest are self-explanatory. I mean, just on 4 and 5 on the communities services review, I mean, there will be input. I think the sad thing is people will have to take the world as we find it. It's not the world that we want it to be. You know, I would rather there was a world where we could expand our investment in the communities area. I'd rather we could expand our neighbourhood grants, community grants, but we can't do that because we don't have enough money to do that. We face terrific other service pressures. And so, you know, sometimes you will get win-win, but I think in this area, you know, we may also get elements where, to be honest, you know, no one's very happy. Now, I could absolutely see the case where if you're doing that sort of thing, that there needs to be more input rather than less. I think that point is understood and well taken, and we've accepted the recommendations. But I think we need to go into it with our eyes open that this is unlikely to be an area of happy consensus, because it just is very difficult. It's very difficult because it's very unwelcome, and it's not something we particularly want to be pursuing. But those are my quick reflections in terms of the Scrutiny recommendations, and as I say, the responses have been tabled.
Thank you very much, Ed. I realised that I was so efficient going through the agenda, I actually managed to miss an item on it, so I wasn't really that efficient at all. So my apologies. Has anyone got any declarations of interest they need to make? No, good. Okie dokie. So we now move on to item 8 on the agenda, which is the medium-term financial strategy. And over to you, Ed.
Yeah, I thought you might just touch on the other Scrutiny recommendations. There's one on.
I beg your pardon. I thought we'd sort of covered off them all together. So
James only spoke to the budget review group, I think, but that's okay. I mean, there's not a lot to say. There was sort of on the capital strategy. There's an answer there on a question. It was kind of a factual question, which has now received a factual answer. And there's a factual answer on the Treasury management strategy as well, which I hope can be noted.
Thanks very much, Ed, and thank you for picking that up. I'd sort of taken it that James was moving them all together, but yeah, thank you. Right, okay, and now, drum roll, over to you for the medium-term financial strategy.
Okay, so yeah, as I say, I will keep my observations on this fairly short. We had hoped in putting the budget together that the cause of local government would be heeded for more money. And, you know, in our case, really that hasn't happened, and it hasn't happened for two reasons. One is the government's offer to government's additional money, which is made available to district councils, I would describe as derisory. We're receiving a one-off payment of £243,000. So we've got the additional utility pressures of 1.2 million a year, got significant pay pressures, we've got the rising costs in our capital programme, and we may say a bit more about this in a minute. We've got significant pressures coming through around homelessness and temporary accommodation. You know, we've got a gross budget, depending on how you look at it, of £80 million a year on the general fund side, and we're getting a one-off £243,000, which came with a press release and an insulting letter saying that they were going to require us to produce some efficiency plan. And by the way, how could we pay a bit less attention to equalities in the workforce? I mean, it's a contemptible government. I mean, I think some of the things which went on in Westminster today brought that home. And the sooner we are, you know, the sooner we don't have them around anymore, the better. But with that, I say we don't get any more. What about the 243? Well, the answer is that's cancelled out by the technical change around council tax for second homeowners. We were one of a number of authorities who said we gave notice before the relevant legislation passed, saying that we wanted to do that, and unfortunately we couldn't. They then, in the process of chaotic conference calls and email correspondence with us, said that we couldn't do that because that was something we couldn't do, although they couldn't give legal advice on it. So anyway, we can't. So what we gain on the swings, we lose on the roundabouts, and it's no more money. There is an improvement because the new leisure contract that we've got is better than we forecast. It's not better. It's not better every year, but it's better if you look at it over a 5-year period. And so what we've done is taken a couple of political judgments. There are some relatively minor items of spend which are listed here, which we propose. But I think the other one, which I would draw to people's attention to, is something I mentioned just now, which is the communities area of the council. Now, what we'd said in that area is that we were really reluctant to make savings here, but because it's an area where we have discretion, and in lots of areas we don't have that discretion, the services are required by statute to be provided, then we do as little as possible. Now, you know, for my money, this medium-term reduction in the savings that we need to find in this area is the right thing to do. I think what it says to people, to our communities in the city, to our staff who are excellent in this area, is we're not doing this lightly. And if we get the opportunity to pull back from the brink, we will. And that's, you know, what we're proposing here. But equally, unfortunately, we didn't get more money than that. You know, and I would, as I say, point people to the fact it was, you know, we've agreed this new leisure deal, and it's actually what should come out of that, which enables us to make that change. We've since the consultation budget, we've agreed a new pay deal with our unions. You know, in recent years, our partnership with our trade unions in Oxford has been absolutely superb, unite in unison. They push us hard. I mean, you know, a number of us have been to meetings individually, also AGMs of the unions, and quite rightly, you know, the position of staff is asserted vigorously. But at the same time, I think the fact we've managed to get an agreement with them, and you know, in such difficult circumstances, when their members are facing really serious cost of living pressures, which hopefully will be alleviated somewhat by the agreement we've been able to come to. You know, I hope that's a really good thing. Really grateful to them. Also grateful, I should say, we as members, we don't do the negotiation directly. Our officers have done that, and I really pay tribute to the officers who've been negotiating on our side, as it were, of the fence there. And it's a good outcome. That really, you know, those are the changes compared to last time. We'll have a political debate about this. Nigel may have some other points he wants to highlight. One which I think I do need to mention, though it will feature in discussions again, is the alarm bells are ringing somewhat about temporary accommodation pressures. I don't know if we've heard the last of that. I think there'll be reference in the next monitoring report to that, but I think our intelligence says there'll be even more reference to it in the monitoring report coming forward. It's no surprise if you have a government policy which deliberately unlinks housing benefit to real rents for years. And if you have a government policy that says, well, you can be evicted if your landlord just fancies having the property back or just charging more rent because they can get more money, then you end up with an awful lot more homelessness. That, you know, that is a fact which we're confronting. It's a fact which means more people are living in hotels, placed in hotels by us, which is absolutely not what we want to have, and that brings a significant cost pressure. You know, I know our officers in this area are working really, really hard to address it. And we'll bring forward options, and I know those will be discussed at future meetings. Where I am, I think, you know, it's a big flashing red light around our MTFS. And it's an area where I fear there may be major pressures coming down the track. But look, you know, each year at the start of our budget process, we think it's going to be really difficult to pull something together. What we're putting forward on the table tonight is a balanced budget. Actually, we know it balances over 5 years. We present for in the main, but it does balance over 5 years. We've been able to respond to the consultation, grateful to people who did respond. It was good to see the number of responses, actually. We've been able to mitigate some of the savings which we least wanted to implement. And there won't be many councils that are able to plan with this long-term horizon. I think it serves us well to do so. So I'd like to move it. I'd like to thank the officers, I'll do that again at council meetings, so I won't labour it now, who've been working on it, both the finance team and also all of the many officers around the council who've contributed. Thanks to Scrutiny as well for their input. And maybe pass over to Nigel for any further comments he would like to make.
Thanks very much, Ed. Nigel.
Thank you, Ed. Yeah, just a couple of comments on, probably reiterate some of the things that Ed was talking about, actually. This, again, has been another sort of difficult budget setting process. You know, we had to contend with utility pressures, about £1.2 million per year, dividend shortfalls from our companies who have experiencing very difficult trading conditions, especially in our housing company and ODS. Pay increases which are not unreasonable compared to the market, basically, but you know, present another £5 million on the budget. At the same time, we get around about £1 million from the government in terms of the finance settlement, and an extra 240,000 basically in January when they supposedly listened to local authorities, actually. And from a financial point of view, you know, it's just not enough. And the other thing I think about the settlement as well is the fact that they continue to make 1 year settlements. And from a budget planning point of view, it's really difficult to second guess what government are going to do in that second year, basically. It's probably understandable in where we're going with potentially a general election sort of thing, but it doesn't make planning any easier. Despite that, basically, despite all that pressures, we have managed to set a 5-year balanced budget, and there are very few authorities in the country that would get to that position. How we've achieved that, we have dipped into reserves, planning to use around 7 million over the 5-year lifetime. And there are some probably unpalatable savings that need to be made in the second year of the medium-term financial plan. As Ed says, basically, if the financial ground gets better, basically, then we may look, or you may look as members to sort of revisit that, basically, as we go forward. But we have got to that position, and you know, it's I think from my finance point of view, sort of thing, it's a very laudable position and something we should maintain. Basically, it demonstrates value for money. It demonstrates a going concern. it will certainly please the auditors actually, at a time when a lot of local authorities are actually issuing Section 114 notices actually. So, long may it last in my view actually. Just to say about the budget responses, there were eventually 307 budget responses when it closed on the 31st of January, slightly more than the paper, obviously, because of timing. And obviously, the essence of this is for Cabinet to approve or recommend to Council a 2.99% increase in council tax, which is the maximum amount allowed under the referendum principles, actually. That's the essence. And then just a note on the housing revenue account, it is for Cabinet to note the increase in the housing rents basically of 7.7%, following the decision that Cabinet took in the previous Cabinet and recommended to Council, which was agreed. That's more of a timing issue, that we can actually land the bills basically for rents in time. But that's where I am from a financial viewpoint.
Thank you very much, Nigel. And traditionally, as I think both as Ed in particular has kind of indicated, we tend to sort of save the debate around the budget for council, because at this point we're kind of merely almost the conduit for getting the budget to council, which is where the kind of true debate happens. But I don't want to stop people if they want to ask questions, make comments at this stage. So has anyone got any questions or comments they want to make? Anna?
I actually do, about all of the consultation responses, because it does seem like that's actually quite a number of them. And what was the sort of general thrust of them, if that is not an inappropriate question?
Yeah, they are listed in the, were they in the report, were they in the appendices? In fact, there was quite a good old appendix. There we go. But I'd point you to paragraph 32 of the report. I mean, basically, to be honest, Anna, it was pretty supported. I mean, more support for probably the easier bit, more of the bits which I'd be more supportive of, to be honest. So the public are happier about the returns from developing social housing. They are about increased garden waste charges, but people are still pretty circumspect, which is good. And people were in Oxford not enthusiastic about freezing council tax and cutting more services. So that was nice to see. I had some interesting items of individual correspondence on the council tax reduction scheme, the gist of which was they were from people campaigning on the issue rather than people who were necessarily in receipt of it themselves. They regretted the move. And I, was able to, very honestly, yeah, me too, and we hope not to do it, but we'll have to see where we are. And, it's very much a sort of last resort area. Let's say, in terms of service priorities, you'll see it there. I should have said, actually, Anna, and you'll know about this. It was a suggestion you made personally that on the reduction in street cleaning, that was another area where we have actually pulled back from next year because of the extra funds. That was, I think, the least popular service change. So there you go. That's somewhere somewhere which by instinct we wouldn't have wanted to see change. We have pulled back on it, and that was backed by the consultation, and there were some general comments. So that's where it is. Yeah, nice to see the engagement.
Thanks, Ed. Any further comments or questions? I'm not seeing any. So can we therefore agree to consider the outcome of the public consultation, agree the amendments to the consultation budget, and recommend it to council in line with the recommendations set out on the agenda? Everyone happy to do that? Thank you very much. We now move on to the capital strategy. Ed.
Thanks. So this is a useful and important document in, excuse me, explaining how our capital programme works, explaining the principles that we follow, being a subject of quite a bit of tidying up over the years, so it hasn't changed very much this particular year. There are just some updates which sort of flow from legislation, which are reflected in this year's strategy. I think, maybe a couple of wider reflections, which now is probably the moment. One is that we're in a position where the cost of capital schemes is rising and rising substantially. We need to, I think, be alert to that in our processes. It's sometimes, as you know, sadly the case that because you want to do something for a particular price, goes in the capital programme, the costs come back high, you then can't do it, you have to review it, and so on. So there's, I suppose, that deftness and willingness to reconsider things. Also greater focus then on sort of value engineering within it. I think it's also more important than ever that we don't put, as members, we're not tempted to put fantasy things in the capital programme. We've all done it, right? We've all said at budget time, we actually, do you know what, an extra 100 grand here and then we can do this. But that's not the right process for capital schemes. Really, we ought to work up schemes first, go through our proper gateway process, and then they should be in the capital programme. And it's a tricky interface, but one which we need to do right. The third thing, and James is still here, something he has rightly drawn attention to in many scrutiny meetings is about planning our capital spend. And I think that will continue to be an area which we focus on in the coming year. And we do expect some slippage. Some slippage will happen. More slippage will happen if the cost of schemes goes through the roof, unfortunately, because you have to reassess your schemes. But we should try and keep it to a minimum, and we should try to pull back from optimism bias where we got schemes which really, keep going in just too early. And we do need our officers, we need our members not to be saying, "Come on, you can do it next year," and then be deaf to the advice saying it's not going to happen next year. We need our officers not to be putting things in that can't be, in fact, can't really be delivered. So. Those are a few observations politically on our capital strategy, but it's, I think, a pretty good model of a document which this authority has.
Thank you very much, Ed. Nigel.
I think it's a pretty useful summary, actually. I'll happy to take any questions on it. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Has anyone got any questions? Any comments? No? Okay, in which case, can we move the report and recommend to council that it approves the capital strategy? Agreed? Fantastic. Thank you very much. It takes us to our final report, which is the Treasury Management Strategy, and back to you, Ed.
Thanks very much indeed. So this obviously governs our investment activity, our borrowing activity, and those areas. There are some changes here in relation to minimum revenue provision rules, which are being clarified, and those are the strategies updated to include that. A number of the other areas, so we, for example, here do a bit of a balancing act, I suppose, about the risks of different investments, different types of investment. We're not proposing to make changes really in the coming year, and we're comfortable with where we are. We retain our ethical investment policy, but colleagues will notice that we've now got a new environmental, social and governance policy, which is attached at Appendix 4. I think it's right we challenge ourselves about environmental, social governance objectives in our Treasury work. I think we need to also, and I direct members to the framing of that, we can't sideline our financial imperatives for that. It wouldn't be in line with the relevant legislation, and also it wouldn't work for us as a council. But of course, there are choices to be made there, and it's right that we surface those. And if we can do the right thing by our environmental, social, and governance objectives while attaining our financial objectives, then of course we should do that. So, with that, I'd like to commend the Treasury Management Strategy for recommendation to our council meeting.
Thank you very much, Ed. And Nigel.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of things to add, actually. A really important document for the finance teams actually to work with, and obviously subsequent to approval by council, actually. This is a real big area for the council, actually. Our borrowing will increase quite substantially over the next 4-year period. You may be interested to know we have around £200 million of the borrowing at the moment, mainly, all in relation to the housing revenue account. That goes back to 2012 and the self-financing deal that we did at that point in time. There is no external borrowing on the general fund at the moment. And again, I'll go back to sort of, authorities and different places that authorities are. A lot of authorities are substantially in debt, basically. We are not in that boat. In terms of, where we got our money from, we're generally from internal balances and reserves. But that position will change actually. And as I say, the housing revenue account or borrowing generally by 2027, 28 will go up to about 900 million, just under £1 billion of the borrowing basically. And largely that will be on the housing revenue account actually. The control mechanism we use on the housing revenue account is interest cover basically. And we apply that quite rigorously. And I think we need to do that to make sure we stay in check actually. It's not a free for all basically in terms of just borrowing to the cows come home sort of thing. We need to keep that in check. So that's something we apply rigorously. And the Treasury strategy also sets out all the indicators, the so-called prudential indicators that we religiously follow basically and comply with, and then report back to Cabinet at regular intervals actually. Finally, it actually sort of governs the way that we manage risk, how and where we place our monies. And we do that in conjunction with financial advisors, the Link Group. And again, that is an absolutely key part of this document as well. And just for some reassurance, I have regular monthly meetings with my finance team, basically in terms of all of this area. Where is the money being placed? How much borrowing are doing? Where are you taking the money from, et cetera, et cetera. So there are some quite rigorous operational controls that we put in place as well. But yeah, a real big area for the authority basically, and something that take very seriously in the finance team actually. So yeah, happy to leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nigel, and thanks again to you and your team for all the work on all of these documents. Has anyone got any questions or comments? Linda.
I know we've got several £1 million wrapped up in sort of social investments, things like the real lettings with residents and so. Is there more that we could be doing in that area? Are there other opportunities that we could be taking?
We're all welcome to other opportunities that come on the table. Actually, I mean, the resonance investment is one, and we have 2 funds running on that basically. I think for 7-year periods. Not quite sure where each of them are. They're different. They're staggered over different periods. Actually, I say we're always looking at some of those opportunities. Actually, we have some green funds in terms of our operational investments. We have some green funds. We apply the ethical policy basically that is contained within the statement in terms of where we place our money. And obviously there was a recommendation from the scrutiny panel basically that will pick up in terms of reviewing where we place our money as well actually. We're always alive to looking at different places. I think the other thing just to say as well, you know, cash balances go up and down and over the period of time actually. So you know, we can't at the moment, we're not locking away our money for longer periods than 6 to 12 months. The longest we have is 12 months. Generally they're at 6-month periods, and that's just money management basically. To maintain a level of cash flow to fulfill all our liabilities, and B, just to ensure that we don't get caught out with any interest rate rises sort of thing. So yeah, we'll say all is open to looking at different things, but at the moment, from a social value point of view, we have those resonance ones, but say we also have some green investments as well, basically.
Thanks very much, Nigel. Any further questions or comments? No? Okay, in which case can we move to the recommendation, which is to recommend that council approves the Treasury Management Strategy and all the other recommendations that are set out on the agenda. Everyone happy to approve those? Thank you all very much. So that only remains for me to take you to the minutes, which are on page 267 of the agenda. Sorry, just get to them. It's quite a lot of papers. So if I take them for accuracy and matters arising together, on page 267, 268, 269, 270, 271, 272, 273, 274 and 275. I'm not seeing anything being raised, so I think that means we can agree them as an accurate record. So thank you all very much. Only remains for me to remind you that the next meeting of Cabinet is on the 13th